Now, I think this is a classic case of self-sabotage. Like, she said it was gonna happen, y'all, and it happened. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I'm going to be breaking down everything we saw unfold between Marshall and Jackie on Love is Blind Season 4. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? I am none of these people's therapist, right? This is all based on edited content that is designed to give us a narrative of the villains, of the heroes, of the victims. And there are some conversations, obviously, you just cannot make up, that we see, that we can dissect with certainty, but we don't always know the context around those conversations, what triggers have preceded it. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. We've seen many times where people fly under the radar on these shows, and then things are revealed later on that completely negate our initial perspectives. So I can only talk about what we saw, but keep in mind, even though I am a licensed therapist, I am not an expert in these people's lives, as I have never even met them. Spoiler alert, listen, if you are watching this, there are going to be a ton of spoilers. So if you haven't finished all the way through to the reunion, do not watch this video. Finish and come back. If you don't care about spoilers, you've already seen the show, let's go. First impressions. My first impression of Jackie, within the first 10 minutes of the very first episode, I remember noticing Jackie saying,
I'm definitely like a kid in the candy store. There's so many options and there's so many choices.
And at the time, I didn't even write it down, but I never forgot it because I remember thinking this could be a person who is very excited about all of the options of men and is not really looking for that specific man, right? Because when you go to a candy store, you don't normally walk out with one piece of candy. You go into a candy store, you're not looking for the one, you're looking for the ones. You're trying to grab everything that you love. Again, I didn't write it down because I was like, you know, maybe you're being a little too tough on her, but as we saw ultimately what ended up happening, that initial impression really did speak volumes into how she was approaching this process. Initial impressions of Marshall. Now, Marshall, I didn't really have any strong impression either way. I just remember thinking, I hope this person has worked through their past hurt. As he was talking about working through the trauma with his father, I remember hoping that this was something he had successfully processed before entering this process of Love is Blind. We've seen in the past where people have not really worked through their past trauma and how it shows up in the relationship. So I just remember making a mental note like, okay, I hope that he really has worked through the stuff he's talking about with his family of origin. Very legitimate, very valid. Good that he was aware and talking about it. I don't believe there's like a finished journey when you're healing from trauma and disappointment, especially with your family of origin. I was hoping that a lot of that work had been done where he could identify triggers and past behavioral responses that he was making an effort or commitment to not do in this relationship. Now, Josh, what was my initial impression of Josh? Similar to Jackie, he said something that concerned me that I was like, what are you really doing in this process? He said, I love the game. And I thought that that was very telling, that he viewed this as like a competition of sorts. He talks a lot about his sports history with competition. And I was like, okay, so are you trying to win a girl or win the girls? Like, that is what I was curious about when he made that statement. So both of them, both he and Jackie, used metaphors that signified that they were possibly not as serious about this process as other people in the process were. And again, I don't always read a lot into these things, but I definitely pay attention to them because as a therapist, you have to pay attention to the smallest things. I can't tell you how many times I work with clients, especially couples, and I say that actually reminds me of blank that they brought up in the beginning of our session, something that was seemingly insignificant that seems very relevant to what we're talking about now. So being able to keep track of your client's history is such an important part of therapy that I cannot watch these shows without making note of even very small things that were said that indicated to me that there was a possibility that they were not here looking for their person. I also had high hopes in the pods with Jackie and Marshall when Marshall was starting to share his intentions with her and she was telling him about her connection with Josh. Why did I like that? I liked that she was not leading him on, and I thought that it was very good how he was handling the conversation. It was good that she was being honest. It seemed like she was being very vulnerable in that discussion, and I felt that Marshall was holding a great space for hearing what she was saying, not villainizing her for it, but using feeling words such as "I am hurt" to let her know how that impacted him. Sometimes, and we'll talk about this when we get to the Kwame and Chelsea episode, when we get bad news or something that could make us feel insecurities, we respond by shutting down and trying to really dismiss the information and act as though it has no effect on us whatsoever, because the fact that someone could say something that would hurt us or make us think differently about ourselves is a very vulnerable position to be in. Some people equate vulnerability with weakness. Even in popular culture, we know it's not the case, but it is super important for us to recognize that to even say that you are hurt is an act of strength. So even though that was a really tough conversation, I felt that they handled that with care. However, I thought it was super interesting how Marshall responded in the guys' lounge. You know, the way that you could just tell he was angry and upset. I actually commended Josh for saying, hey, like, are you talking about me? Because Marshall's, being kind of loud and aggressive. And he's like, are you talking about me? And he was like, depends. Did you tell Jackie you're going to pack up your bags and go home? This is one of those situations where I don't think there is a clear right person and wrong person. I could see some people arguing that Marshall showed his colors when he was getting all upset and angry. Josh should be able to have as much opportunity to develop a connection with Jackie too. But I think he was just upset that this was a conversation that he was not aware of the level of feeling that Josh was claiming to be developing toward Jackie. Josh has said in later statements that he was very intentional about not sharing who his connections were with the other men. So it does make sense if, Marshall's having a lot of conversations. He knows who everyone is gunning for. He knows Josh might have an interest in Jackie, but Josh maybe up until that point hasn't said that how interested he is in Jackie or that he's falling in love with her or anything like that. It might feel to him like a game. And given how it seems like maybe Josh was conducting himself in a way where a lot of the guys seem not to care for him, he might have felt like, okay, you're playing with her. You're wanting to win this game. So I thought that Marshall's frustration was warranted, but I also really commended Josh for being straightforward and being like, hey, are you talking about me? And I thought that conversation went well. I didn't think they were going to hug and be friends by the end of it, but I did think that the way they handled the conversation, as difficult and extreme as this process is, I commended both of them for how it was handled. But what I didn't like is how Josh then talks in his confessional about how it's a game and how he's always been very competitive. That started to make it seem more like his intentions may not have been pure. What I loved about Jackie and Marshall's reveal, I loved that it was really silly. It seemed like they right away had this connection that was goofy and funny. And I think that is what a lot of us started to become invested in, was the friendship that was developing. Because really, for a lot of us, humor is very vulnerable. And if you're going to be silly and joke around with someone, sometimes it requires a level of trust that you don't really have with strangers. So I was hopeful seeing their reveal. And I was like, okay, they seem attracted to each other. They're already having fun with each other. I thought that was, a really great reveal. And I was excited about what was about to unfold with them. As everything unfolded, obviously, watching this back, it's a bit tainted, but you know, I have to watch it so I can give the full analysis of, was I seeing anything at that time? And at this time of the reveal, I was not concerned. I thought, okay, you know, it seems like they're both attracted to each other, even though Jackie never said outright, you're so handsome, I'm so attracted to you, and Marshall was saying that. She was giving indications that she did find him attractive, so I didn't think anything of it at the time. The saddest thing leading up to their proposal is when Marshall talks about, in his confessional, how he has in the past been both bullied by his emotions, which that I thought the language there was so strong. You know, you're already dealing with these difficult emotions, then on top of that, being bullied by the outside world. So you've got the internal and external battle and war happening. And he feels that in the pod, specifically, I'm assuming with Jackie, that he was able to utilize his emotions in a way that was celebrated. And just knowing how everything ended up unfolding, it's so sad to see that that is really one of the main reasons why he chose Jackie. He felt that he was safe to express his emotions, and ultimately she ended up using that as ammunition to call into question his sexuality. And she warned him in the pods, and she also warned him when they were in Mexico. She even told him, she was like, I am not worried about you. I'm worried about me. And that is the moment when I was like, okay, she's giving you a warning. He's like, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to let that happen. That's the thing. You cannot save someone from themselves. That is something you will never be able to do. As a therapist, that is one of the most difficult things to accept, is that a person is coming to you for support, for help, to be challenged, so they say. And when you get to that point, and you recognize that, hey, we've been talking about all these skills you can use. We've been making parallels between what you've experienced in the past and what's happening right now. We've identified the behaviors that are getting in the way of the future that you said that you wanted. If they are not ready to be uncomfortable and make those different choices, you cannot make them. And that is a really difficult thing for anyone who cares about someone to witness. And if you're the person dealing with it, it's super hard to watch yourself do this. She saw it coming. She knew that she had a huge likelihood of self-sabotaging. And I think that is what we ultimately saw. Jackie has this hyper obsession with the concept of a real man, and it might be cultural. I don't know what her cultural background is, but she has this hyper fixation on what constitutes a real man. When she first meets Marshall, she looks at the camera and says, this is a good man for me. When she talks about him in the pod, she talks about him being in touch with his emotions and knows that this is the kind of guy she needs. She says to him in Mexico, you're a real man. That's what she says. I'm not worried about you at all. I'm worried about me. And so then later on, when they're having issues, she starts talking about how he's not a real man because they're not having enough sex, and texts were leaked where she's telling his friends he's got sugar in his tank. You know, just things that are calling to question his character and who he has portrayed himself to be, and basically saying that he is being deceptive, deceitful. And I believe this hyperfixation on a real man might have something to do with her relationship with the earliest men in her life, typically father, brothers, whatever the dynamics may be, maybe uncles. Someone has been telling her that you need a real man, and this is what a real man does, and this is what you need to bring home to us. And I'm assuming that might be a big factor in why she's so laser focused on making sure she's with a real man, even as her own definition fluctuates of what a real man is, because at some point it seems like she's suggesting that being in touch with your emotions is a marker of a good man, a real man. But then later on, it seems like as Marshall said in the past, that the emotions are almost weaponized, as a real man isn't so soft and sensitive. Those are very contradictory messages, and it's very difficult for someone to know how to navigate the best type of partner they can be for you when your definition of what that looks like is changing over time. She said, if I go back home, I'm going to turn back into who I used to be, and you don't deserve that. And I think that's what we saw. She warned him. He's like, you won't. I'm not worried about it. And when a person is giving you warnings about their self, pay attention. Make sure that you're not so busy trying to comfort them and telling them you'll love them through anything that you are not taking notes and paying attention to if those warnings become reality. A lot of times we hold on so tight to who a person presented themselves as in the very beginning of a relationship that years can pass where they've never been that person again, or they're rarely that person. And we're holding on to that because we made this promise that, you're not going to do that, or I won't let you do that, or I'll love you through that. When really we didn't even know what that looked like or how it affect us. So always listen to those warnings. Ask questions, stay curious. Marshall did not stay curious in this moment. Marshall went straight into comforting mode. I'm not worried. I won't let that happen to you. I used to be that person. I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to leave when it gets rough. I'm going to stay.
I'm not worried about it.
I hope.
You're just in your head about it.
You did stay, right? Ultimately, that had nothing to do with it. And she was looking at him like, okay, you want to give me all this comfort. You don't even know what it's like. And he didn't. I truly don't believe there was anything Marshall could have done to salvage this relationship. I really don't. Now, that is one thing I do love as a person with self-awareness. I've always said I can deal with absolutely any personality if that person is self-aware and is open to recognizing how their behaviors affect the people around them. I can really deal with anything. It's the delusional element, that really gets me, and that really takes me back to last season with Zay and Cole. Like, a lot of people might be equally upset with Jackie as they were with Zay last season. I am not, because Jackie gave warnings, and I feel like Zay was she has really painted herself as the victim. And in the reunion, which we'll get to, I feel that Jackie started to kind of do that as well, try to paint herself as the victim and say she's taking accountability, which I'm not really sure if she has. From what I've seen, it doesn't look like she has. But I did appreciate at this point that she was very self-aware enough to give him that warning. Now, when you fast forward just a little bit, they're having this great day, and then Jackie is having an emotional breakdown. That's the moment when I started asking myself, what is going on with her family? Now, it has come out later, what was going on. I think her father was dealing with cancer and she's supporting them. I read from the notes I was taking while I was watching. I said, it seems like Jackie's feeling guilty for having a good day. I wonder what's going on with her family. So she did ultimately come out and say that is what was happening. She was feeling guilty. And I said, she's worried about the lows after feeling high and happy on this trip. And that's the truth. Later on, that came out as well. But she was feeling like, okay, I don't want to get too excited. This is one of the key elements of self-sabotage. When you start feeling a little too happy and you're like, okay, if I continue to feel this happy, that means that when this is taken away from me, I am going to feel even lower. I don't want that pit. I don't want that drop, that fall from being at my peak of happiness. And so you start doing little things to try to take some control back. It's like if you're on a roller coaster and you had the option to do a lever that would stop the roller coaster whenever you want. You would see that roller coaster stopping a lot more often than we do at amusement parks, right? Let's say you're blindfolded and you don't even know when the drop is going to happen. And you're literally stopping yourself on your way up the roller coaster, right? Like you haven't even got to the peak yet, but you're getting in your own way of experiencing that peak, being so afraid of the drop. So self-sabotage is that lever. It's you trying to give yourself a little bit more control over what that drop is going to feel like. And so that is what I believe happened with Jackie, is that she started being like, this man is too emotionally secure for me. He's too mature for me. And just as she's feeling that guilt of being happy, like as far as how it would affect her family, her responsibilities there, I think she started feeling similarly that guilt of not being ready for Marshall and knowing that what he needed out of a partner, not believing that she could give it to him, and actually being afraid of trying and then disappointing both herself and him. That's what I believe happened here. I believe this was self-sabotage. Now you might ask, okay, well then where does it come in with the stuff with Josh? I do think Josh was someone who could meet her closer to where she is currently at, instead of Marshall, who she probably felt she needed to maybe level up and grow a little bit more to be with someone like him. I think Josh and her, neither one of them was probably really ready for marriage, and Marshall was looking for a wife. I don't think she was ready for this show. I heard somebody ask her that, and her response was, I was ready for this process, but I was not ready for Marshall. And I think if you were not ready to get married, then you were not ready for this process. Back to the candy factory thing. Something small that Jackie did that I was like, why? Is when she first sees Brett, you know, when all the couples get together in Mexico, and she's like,
Wait a minute, he's kind of fine.
Oh my God, I'm dead right now.
He's kind of fine.
I told you.
now, I was really curious, like, how is he going to handle that? You know, is that going to be the kind of thing where, you know, later on he's asking her to rate him or different things? You know, just basically being upset later that she thought Brett was attractive, but he took it in stride. I mean, I think his initial reaction was like, I can't believe you're saying that in front of me, but he didn't seem to hold it against her, at least from what we saw. You know, again, some things never make it to the episode, but I thought that that was very telling of her. You know, it kind of took me back to that candy factory metaphor of like, you know, she's really still very much in the mindset of attraction. And I just thought, even if you thought he was really attractive, if Marshall didn't ask, okay, who did you think was attractive? I thought that that was a little disrespectful to just say that loudly too, so other people could hear her. You know, people might disagree with that, but I just thought that that was something that was unnecessary. You could just think that. You didn't really need to say that out loud. I thought Marshall making pancakes was really sweet. I loved that moment. And when she's like, I'm going for a second plate. These are the moments where I was still very hopeful, because when Jackie was breaking down about her family when they returned that evening, but the way Marshall was able to just be patient with her and wait for her to want him to be there, come in, give her a hug when she was ready. Even though she was like kind of pushing him away, he still was very patient, and he's like, I'm not running away from this difficult moment. I'm going to provide you with the support that you need. We saw that again when his family came and she was in a bad place. And he was like, okay, I can take them on a walk around, so you can like, you don't have to meet with them right now. You can, you know, get that moment to regroup. And we ultimately find out that the night before is when they had the joking thing where she called him soft and sweet, and he was trying to be jovial back and say something about her jaw and looking like a man. And, you know, basically a joke gone too far, as he acknowledged on the reunion. I don't like how Jackie tried to say he referred to her as a derogatory term. Like, I just feel like, you know, that's the kind of stuff when people do that on the show and they try to say something very mysterious, you know, just to build a world of doubt around a person that the world is rooting for. Like, you're doing that for a reason. You know, it's like a PR thing. Like, let's, you know, put a little smoke and mirrors over here. I'm not going to say what was said. I'm just going to say that it was said in a way that will get some blind support from blind followers, you know. So I didn't really like how she did that. He provided some clarity, and because he was more specific, I have to go with his version of what happened. And, you know, if she comes forward and says something else, then okay. But for now, that's the detail that I have to go with, especially since we do have proof of her specifically saying rude, mean, spiteful, hateful, cruel things to him, about him, to others. Because of that, I can't just say that, you know, she's the victim in this situation. I feel like Marshall was really giving a lot to this relationship. It did not seem mutual or reciprocal. And it was interesting because Jackie was using language when they were in Mexico, like, I've never had someone reciprocate my feelings and care. And from what we saw, again, only from what we saw, it seemed like all of Marshall's actions were not met with reciprocation. It is interesting that Jackie has created a narrative in her mind where she's giving, and it's not reciprocal typically. Whereas in this situation, it seemed like the other way around. When Jackie is having that moment of stress before meeting Marshall's family, and Marshall says in his confessional, he says to the camera, you know, this is what she needs and I can do that for her. That is the sign of someone who is securely attached. When we talk about attachment styles, a lot of the research suggests that if you have an insecure attachment style, like avoidant attachment or anxious attachment, if you're with someone who is securely attached, that can actually be something that helps you become more securely attached. It's like having those fears that you have developed from your relationships with your family of origin and your primary caregivers. Those things can be healed in a way from your relationship with a secure partner. And when Marshall says, this is what she needs, I can be that for her, I can be patient for her, I can be caring towards her, I can be understanding. That to me indicated that he is securely attached. I think Jackie seems like she has a bit of an avoidant attachment style, and that when she's starting to feel really safe and comfortable, she pulls away, because that's a very unsafe feeling. But it could be more. Again, we only see such a limited scope of what's happening that, I wouldn't feel confident saying for sure that's their attachment styles, because I just have not seen enough.
What else am I supposed to do? Sit in my feelings and sleep next to someone who said that I was not man enough for them?
I never said you weren't man enough for me. I just said to be more aggressive. We don't have sex, bro.
This is a moment where then my notes literally say Jackie is self-sabotaging, as she warned that she would. Earlier, she said that he was a real man, and now she's scared. But when she says she wants someone who is aggressive, Marshall's like, what does that look like? What does that mean? She's like, we don't even have sex. Now, things have come up later to explain maybe why he wouldn't be comfortable having sex with her. Something about maybe discovering something around STDs. You guys know I usually don't stay on top of like the rumor mill and the gossip, because there's gonna be people who are always revealing things for 5 seconds of clout. Like literally none of us are gonna remember the name of the people who come forward with all these receipts and allegations. But I do always appreciate it when you guys send me things so I can like see what's going on. I don't really know if Jackie even fully understands what the term aggressive means. But I think what she meant is that she wanted him to be a bit more assertive, maybe like initiate things, especially since she referred to sex as one of the things that she was saying was a reason why he isn't aggressive. Then Marshall starts clapping. She goes, who are you clapping at?
So what are you telling me then?
Who are you clapping at?
You! I'm in your face!
You're not clapping at me. You better fix it.
Is that not me being
You
aggressive?
better fix it.
I'm testing you right now. Is that not being aggressive?
Which was interesting, right? Because if you want someone who's aggressive, him clapping at you certainly should not be the limit of where that aggression can go. Yelling, being mean, that's aggression. That's what aggressiveness looks like. I am not a big proponent or fan of the narrative that a lot of people say, if I want somebody that's gonna put me in my place, because it's kind of like, why are you not more interested in challenging yourself, being self-aware, and doing the work of improving on your own? Why should someone need to treat you like a child and chastise you and put you in your place? Like maybe act like an adult and know those things on your own. Maybe you could be interested in someone challenging you to be better, but I think the idea of wanting someone to put you in your place really absolves you from the responsibility and accountability of putting yourself in place and improving, progressing, acknowledging your flaws and working on them, and expecting another person to do that for you. I am not an advocate for that idea. Now, I think Marshall took that and he was like, okay, let me say the most savage, honest thing that I can say. And he's like, okay, you know what? Honestly, I saw you as a project.
I don't make you feel like nothing, so why the are you still with me if I didn't make you feel like nothing?
Because I see you as a project and I saw potential.
When he said that, I was like, yikes! Like literally in my notes, I wrote yikes. Like I could not believe he said that. But I think he was being truthful, right? You have a person like Marshall who feels like, okay, and I see this all the time. Typically, I see this in a heteronormative relationship. The woman is the person who is doing this, who basically, you know, maybe you have worked through so much of your past traumas and you feel like you know what you were acting like when you were really hurt, and it's almost like you want to pay it forward. So like you want to help someone else achieve their dreams, or maybe a lot of times you haven't got to where you want to go, but it's easier to like focus externally on that project of a person instead of focusing on your own areas that you need to be working on improving. And so he said, you know, honestly, I saw you as a project. I completely believed him on that. I did not think that was a kind thing to say, but I think in a moment where your partner is asking you to be more aggressive, it's like, okay, I'm not going to hit you, but I'll be more aggressive with my words. I'll be more savage with my language. And it seems like she was struggling with that as well. But I also think that ultimately that's the reason why she came to him and gave him that hug. I think him saying something mean to her and then apologizing made the dynamic feel more familiar to her, unfortunately, and comforted her in a way where she was able to then go for that hug. And that is really sad to know that you need a certain level of dysfunction in your relationship to feel safe and comfortable, because that is what you're the most familiar with. Later on, when he was like, she wants that toxic kind of love, and I was like, yup, That's what I'm saying. She is the most comfortable based on what we saw. Again, none of this is definitive. This is just based on my perceptions of what I've seen with her and filling in the blanks with what I work on with clients. But it seems like chaos is something that she is more comfortable with. And it seems like given the high level of stress within her family, especially at that point, calm was something that might have put her in a place of having to deal with her thoughts too much, and she needed the distraction of a more chaotic relationship. Now later on, when Marshall's trying to unpack, like, let's discuss this, and she's like, I'm so tired. And this is a situation that I'm talking about with couples on a daily basis. You know, you got the one person who wants to talk about it right now. Let's get this taken care of. Let's discuss this. You know, I don't want this to be an issue again. And the other person who needs time. I'm of the camp, if one person, if even one person needs that time, give it to them. Now, someone did send me a great comment and they said, okay, what if you give that person the time, but they always say they don't want to talk about it right now, they never get back to it? That is a very important caveat, because when I say give them that time, that's with the understanding that you guys are going to come back to this conversation. So if you are the person that needs the time, you need to be able to give some indication of when you guys will be able to return to this conversation. Like Jackie said, let's talk about it tomorrow, right? But then Marshall's saying, okay, but you're at work all day. Like by the time you get home at night, I've had an exhausting day at work and now I don't want to talk about it. That is not leaving room for having that conversation. If your partner is giving you the gift of giving you that space where you can process, you need to give them the gift of some assurance that it is important to you to have that talk. So I would say, you know, like give them a time if you can, like, you know what, tomorrow morning, let's wake up a little bit early so that, you know, we can talk about this before I leave for work and we can get through as much of it as we can. If we need to finish talking about it, I will try to make sure I leave enough emotional energy for us to talk about it when I'm off work. Making sure that your partner knows you're not leaving them hanging and they have some idea of when you guys are going to finish this conversation. You both should be taking that time to jot down your thoughts if you can, maybe do a bit of role play, practicing what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, assessing your tone, you know, figuring out what word choices are the best. Because if you're going to take that time, you need to make sure you're making the best use of it. And then Jackie says things like, you know, just keep loving me. That's all you need to do. And he's like, come on now. Clearly, me loving you is not doing it. We are struggling and me loving you has not helped at all. And so, you know, those kind of blanket statements, platitudes, that is not going to help in moments where you guys need to specifically work through how you're going to navigate a stressful dynamic. Now, here's where we start getting upset, right? Up until this point, I was trying to hold space for both of them. I appreciated that Jackie had a process she was working through. I thought maybe, you know, you weren't really ready for this process, but you're here now. You got your person now. They want to be with you. He seems committed to working through this with you. This is the moment where I think she lost a lot of us. And I know a lot of y'all she lost way earlier, but I was giving her a lot of grace. But this was the moment where she lost me. I thought Jackie was handling herself okay at that party. I was like, okay, she's not being overly flirtatious. I thought Josh was being pretty disrespectful. He's like, hey, if you're not gonna really be with him, be with me. And she seemed like she was being very non-committal about that. Like, okay. But then the next day when she's talking and saying, like last night or the night I saw Josh, I was immediately attracted to Josh. That bothered me because what is this about? You know, it's like, it seemed like that was the definitive statement. I'm immediately attracted to Josh. Like, okay, you're also attracted to Brett. Like, it doesn't mean that you need to be in a relationship with them just because you're attracted to them. I didn't like how she said to Josh that Marshall is too sensitive for her, which was so ironic when she has been the one very prone to mood swings, shutting down, tears, shutting him out. How can you say he's too sensitive when, from what we've seen at least, he's been somewhat of an emotional rock, right? He's been the stable one. There's nothing wrong with being affected by the stressors that are impacting your life. But I think it's unfair to say that Marshall is too sensitive when you are the person who is being very sensitive to stress you're understandably enduring and having an emotional reaction to, but he seems to be more level than you are. The stress he's dealing with is navigating this relationship with you. Then when Josh was asking, you know, what is Marshall gonna think? And she just says, I don't care. That was so cruel and callous. And for a person who you said loves you well, for you to be that apathetic about how your choices are going to affect him, that was pretty much one of the cruelest things she could have said or done in this situation. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to just not be with him, you could just not be with him. You could date somebody, but you definitely didn't need to meet up with someone on camera that you know Marshall has a relationship with. And then when you break up with him, now I know she's saying the timeline is different, that she actually broke up with him before she met up with Josh. But to even bring Josh up in that breakup conversation, it seems like it was done with the intention to hurt. And she's like, see you around, whatever. You are intentionally hurting a person that has told you that he cares about you, has showed you that he cares about you, and has said he wants a future with you. That really was hard to watch. Then she says to Josh, the legal part of marriage scares her.
You see yourself marrying me?
I could, but the legal marriage part, it's scary to me. If you want marriage anytime soon, I can't give that to you.
And I'm like, why are you on this show? That's the whole premise of the show. This show's supposed to be about people who are ready to be married, have tried everything else, and they're like, you know what? I need to try something radically different so that I can have that future that I want with someone forever. If you say the legal part of marriage scares you, that to me means that you were never intending to get married. And that means that you wasted the time of someone who very vocally said that that is what they want. And then to end that with a kiss. I mean, how tacky and inconsiderate was that for both of them? That was the moment I was like, okay, you guys are meant for each other, because if you'll treat someone like that, I can't imagine what it's going to look like if they don't work out, how they'll be treating each other. I hope that they have grown from this situation and that would not be the case. I know Josh has made a video sharing his point of view. Again, I try not to have a villain victim mindset, but when you make choices like that, it's very difficult to think that you are being considerate of another person's feelings. She even literally says to Marshall, I can't love you because I'm attracted to Josh. Like, what? If anybody on here has ever been married, has ever been in a relationship, you know you're gonna be attracted to people for the rest of your life. That is not a reason not to be with someone. That is not a reason not to be with someone. If you're saying, I can't be with you because I'm not attracted to you, that's different. But I can't be with you because I'm attracted to this one other person. Like, girl, when you're with Josh, you're gonna be attracted to other people too. That's a part of life. The whole ring thing, what are my thoughts on it? I feel like when it comes to an engagement ring, there are a lot of people who have views that, you know, it's a gift, you keep it. And then some people feel like, well, hey, if you're the reason why the engagement isn't going any further, that was an investment that the person made in your relationship. This is a unique situation because Love is Blind paid for the ring. So who cares? As far as like from a financial perspective, my main takeaway with the ring situation is I did understand what Marshall was saying when he was like, that was a symbol of our love, and you were basically like spitting on what I thought was our love story. You know, so I do understand that. I don't really think he has anything to gain from having the ring. I thought it was weird that she doubled down on, I'm keeping the ring. Like, I was really looking at her. I'm like, you're the one saying you don't want to be with him, but also you want to hold on to the ring. Like, what is your reason for holding on to the ring? If you're saying you don't want to be with him, like, what is your reason for holding on? Oh, well, because I meant the promise at the time. Like, okay, but you didn't keep the promise. I mean, I feel we could go back and forth on that all day. I thought it was weird that Jackie doubled down on wanting to keep the ring, but I also thought it was weird that Marshall asked for it back in the first place since it's a ring that he didn't pay for. So the whole situation was odd that it came down to rings, but I think he was just trying to take something back. Like, he feels like everything, he'd been robbed of everything in this process, and he's like, I'm taking something back. I just thought the way Jackie handled the breakup and everything was so cruel. And I think this is the person she was referring to, and she was like, I don't want to go back to the person I was because you don't deserve that. And I think this is the person she was referring to, this savage, mean, cruel person. Like, just to be like, okay, see you around. Like, why are you being mean? Why? You just broke this man's heart, and on top of that, you're acting as though you're the person that has a right to being angry. I just don't understand that. I love at the end when she goes,
I don't know if I'm gonna be with anybody. Damn, I'm crazy. I need to probably do some self-work.
I was like, okay, as long as you're still there and you recognize that you need to do some self-work, and I hope she's done it. In the reunion, She suggests that she has been doing self-work and she's grown, but the fact that she believes she's taking accountability when she's never really issued Marshall an apology or anything like that suggests to me that that process is definitely still happening. The growth is definitely something that needs to be continued. Now, I will say I was very happy that she broke up with him in private, because I don't like it when people go all the way to the weddings. You guys know how I feel about this. If you watch my video with Zay and Cole, I don't like that you want to just like pretend like there's a chance you might say yes when you know you're saying no. And I know that the producers probably push for you to make it to the altar, like that is the experiment. But I feel like in a case like this where you know like weeks in advance that you are not going to marry this person, I don't think it's fair to drag them all the way to the altar just to say that in front of a crowd of people. I think that's really cruel, and I don't care if it makes for good TV. I really don't want someone to have to recover from that level of embarrassment and humiliation if they don't have to. So I was happy that the breakup happened before the weddings. Okay, let's talk about the reunion. As we know, not a lot was revealed on the reunion. I mean, Jackie and Josh came forward that they've been living together. They've been together for a year. Now, I know for a lot of you are like, oh my gosh, they've been together for a year. I don't think a year is a super long time, you know, especially when you are trying to prove a point. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen people go longer in relationships and not be serious about it the whole time. So I don't think that that necessarily means anything. I'm hoping the best for all these couples that are together, that they really have found their person. It's exhausting looking for your person. So I do hope that everyone has found that person, but I do think it's significant that they're living together. You know, I wonder how long they've been living together. I'm not upset with Jackie for being with Josh. I just don't like how little care she put into relaying that information to Marshall. And I really didn't care for the way Vanessa handled the conversation via Zoom, because I know a lot of you are curious about my perspective on Vanessa and Nick. I have absolutely never understood why they were the host of the show from the very beginning. And I haven't said anything about it because I was like, well, if other people like them, you know, I don't talk about hosts on shows. You know, like that's not what I do. I break down relationship dynamics. But I've never understood why they would be hosts on the show. I don't think, even though they've been together for a long time, we never know what's happening behind closed doors of any relationship. I don't think that they've necessarily proven that they can support the couples. I don't think they've ever even tried to really support the couples through whatever they're stressed out with. They seem to be as invested in the drama and tea as the average viewer, as opposed to shows like Married at First Sight, where they do have people who have had experience either, you know, spiritually supporting couples, sexually supporting couples, or if they have therapists on there. I like that more, where it's like, hey, if you're having issues, you have someone you can contact, versus like, I don't think Nick and Vanessa are probably a good resource for the couples that are struggling, especially when they are thinking through the lens of what's going to make this a really successful, popular season. And because of that, drama is something that they are going to be targeting. I also think that Vanessa tends to have a very skewed perspective on what the world wants to focus on or cares about, you know, like the stuff that people really want to have answered, or the people who might be hurting along with cast members. The way that interview was handled with Jackie and Josh, really, we didn't get many answers because she was just so focused on basically absolving Jackie of any guilt and being like, well, hey, the reason that it didn't work out is because you're with this man right here who you love. And it's like, okay, but the way that it was handled was so hurtful. Like, we need to discuss that. So I don't think that that interview really gave us much information, and it definitely didn't provide Marshall with any closure. And I felt terrible for Marshall sitting there in the reunion, having to face Vanessa live. Like, when he goes, there was a lot happening in that interview. I feel like he was trying to like give Vanessa an opportunity to be like, I'm so sorry if it seemed like I was, you know, not advocating for you in that moment. But, you know, the way she was answering the question, and because you're saying you forgot everything that happened, here's what happened. Like, it just felt so mean, girl. Like, it just felt like, you know, you want to get under his skin and hurt his feelings. I'm sure she'll say that that was not her intention, but as a viewer, that's what it felt like to me. This was not open-ended questioning. This was not neutral questioning. The way she was talking to Jackie and Josh in a way that was like just so supportive, and she was talking in a way to Marshall as if she just wanted him to respond to everything that they had said in their Zoom interview, and, you know, not really giving him an opportunity to kind of address his own hurts or pains or get answers. And he really was cheated in this process. He absolutely was. It's just this idea that if you regret doing the show, or if you had a negative experience on the show, if you felt cheated in any way by the show, she seems so committed to defending the show itself that she forgets that there are real people that are a part of this process that also need an opportunity to be advocated for, or at the very least to share their side of things. You need to just focus on asking open-ended questions. Honestly, there's so much more that could be said about Nick and Vanessa, but I'll just say I absolutely never understood why they were hosts of the show. I've always found their commentary to be cringy. Nick has said things, you know, like asking about their sex lives where it was clearly planned, and then, you know, when nobody wants to answer, then Vanessa goes, oh, he's just being creepy Uncle Nick. Like, I just feel like the whole setup of them being on there is weird from the moment he introduced himself as, and obviously I'm Nick Lachey, or whatever he said. That's all I'll say about that for now, because I know a lot of you were curious. That is my breakdown with Marshall and Jackie. I think Jackie self-sabotaged. Marshall tried his best to support her and be there for her. Do I think he became angry and frustrated? Did it show? Of course it did. I think I would feel similarly, so that's my own bias in that. And I think a lot of us feel for him, and I personally haven't seen Jackie take much accountability, just very malicious. That's the word that comes to mind for me with Jackie now, is malicious. I had a lot of grace for her. I felt like the struggle she was having with this process, the stress she was dealing with at home, like I thought it all made a lot of sense. But in the end, to choose to be so callous and cruel and be like, bye, see you, I don't care how this makes you feel. Once you get to that level of meanness, it's very hard for me to find anything redeeming or understandable about that choice. So those are my views. Thanks for watching with me. If you're in the live premiere, it's so good to chat with you. I love hearing your thoughts as I go. Let me know what couple you want me to do next. I think a lot of you have wanted me to do Chelsea and Kwame, which I'd be happy to do that. Hope that you subscribe to the channel if you like this content. Y'all, let me know what other videos you want, because this is starting to become like a Love is Blind fan account, and that was never my intention with this channel. I actually really enjoyed the season. I loved it, and y'all let me know what you want to see next. I appreciate you watching this all the way until the end. You definitely didn't have to, so thank you.